Hey everyone, so this is going to be part 2 in the binary cognitive mechanics series. But before we start, I just wanted to give a shout out to Otim. Thank you for seeing this coin and for um, pushing it and for sort of already doing the groundwork to explaining what it is. Very grateful for that. And I hope everyone can benefit from what you've done here. So let's just share the presentation. Get rid of me. No one wants to see me. Here we go. So, okay, experience versus intellect. So let's start with this coin here. One of the things experience is doing is it's tracking something that's different for everybody. Everyone's going to have a very different subjective experience, right? And you'll see that here. You'll see that these people could be at the same sports game, but one side is cheering and the other side is not happy with what's going on, right? And they're having a very different experience, even though they're in the same place at the same time, right? And here too, you see this kid is having a different experience than these other kids. And this guy's being really relaxed, smoking a cigarette, chilling out, different experience, right? And here as well, one of them is afraid, one of them is happy. Right? Very different experience, even though they're going through the same sensory. And then here as well, this is a shared experience, right? But someone is more in their emotions and one person is more checking others what their emotions are. One person is more in the sensory, one person's more in their own emotional state. So experience as well here, right? So experience is how we connect to our body and what it goes through, right? We can't really have an experience without a body, without some way to gather that experience, right? And so it's how we connect to that body and how that experience. We act and react in order to optimize our direct experience. So part of processing experience is reacting to the experience or acting in that experience and trying to optimize that experience, right? So what food do you want to go experience? What's your day going to be like, right? So trying to optimize that experience is also part of what experience is. And we also have instincts and desires that relate to experience, right? We see someone attractive, our instincts are going to kick in, and it's going to relate to that experience, right? We relate to the experience of others through our own experience. And so, yeah, the way that we can see that someone else is laughing and smiling is because we're seeing them having an experience and we can relate to it. It could be complete falsehood and lies. They could just be on their face. They could just be actors, right? They might not actually be experiencing what we perceive they are, but we're relating to that experience regardless through the way we would experience that, right? And we process our experience as we experience it. So I'm going to talk about this last one a little bit. So when we recall an experience, in order to process it again, we relive that experience, right? We have to go through it again. And you'll see that happen. I don't like to pick on the SI, but you see the SI doing that a lot, is they will go through that entire thing from beginning, middle to end in order to relive it again, to process it again. And they literally are reprocessing it as they're talking about it. Same thing with emotions. In order to process our emotions, we have to go back into that experience and reprocess it again. This is something that actually trauma is starting to deal with. All of the biggest findings in dealing with trauma, past trauma, is forcing the person back into that experience so they can relive it. And like, it sounds counterintuitive, right? Because trauma is like you're stuck reliving that same experience over and over again. But what they do in trauma counseling is they have the person relive the experience and make a different choice and then see that they can get out of it. And that's what breaks the cycle of trauma. So trauma is all around experience, right? And in order to process possible emotions, so this is something that's more NF, right? But you'll see the NFs, in order to pre-process those emotions, they have to simulate the situation and experience them, right? You can't pre-process emotions just by thinking about it, just by contemplating, oh, this emotion. No, you actually have to feel that emotion beforehand in order to let out that energy and process it, right? And then when the moment happens, you'll already have gone through it and you'll be able to handle it better, right? So experience is really the sensing and the feeling together. Whereas opposed the intellect. Now, Otim, I'm sorry, I know this is your you're binary here and you don't like the term intellect. But this is the term that I came to because detached is a little, it's a little less easy for people to grasp, I think. And also I wanted the IE dichotomy. But anyways, we'll just talk about intellect as a concept and not actually just the word intellect. So what the NT side of it is so the intellect is actually detached from experience, and it tries to operate independently from the experience. Okay, it tries to detach itself. It's just really funny how I was just talking to, I hope I can say this, Alice, but she was talking about how if she has problems, people problems or whatever, she needs to detach from her feelings. And it was really interesting, that wording. It's like just as I was preparing this, she said, yeah, that's my solution, is to detach from the feelings. It's like, yeah, like that's interesting. Like the double deciding, you're choosing to be attached to the feelings or detached from them. Yeah. It is free to speculate when it is devoid of emotional attachment and physical form, right? And so really you see this guy here speculating, he's in his intellect, and he's doing it because he's free from the emotional attachment and the physical form. He's completely free to speculate, free of it, right? Now that doesn't always happen, right? Sometimes your thinking becomes dependent on your feeling, right? You could be very upset and then all of your thinking is focused on solving that problem, right? But it's still, so it does get attached. The thinking can be attached to, like the intellect can be attached to the experience, right? But it's only truly free to be what it is when it's detached, right? So it can still process our experience, but it does not require us to relive that experience, only to reference it, right? We can also experience our intellect, but this experience does not affect its substance. So yeah, when we're thinking, when we're in our NT, when we're processing things like this, that is an experience, right? But it's not an experience of the body. It's not an experience that is connected necessarily to the time we're in or to the place we're in or to our emotional state, right? It's an experience that is disconnected from the body, an experience that is disconnected from the substance, right? Okay, so here are the approaches. And so this is the coin we were just talking about here, experience versus intellectual, right? And you can see here, I added implicit and explicit here just to give reference to what the approaches are doing. So if you see the intellect and the explicit, you put them together, these two things together end up looking a lot like thinking, right? And so this is where thinking comes from, these two together. And then the same thing, if you see intellect like this and you see implicit, right? What's not seen, the intellect is processing the unseen, that's intuition, right? And then the same thing, if you have an experience, right? This experience, and it's connected to the implicit, to the unknown, to the unseen, that's complete feeling, right? And then here, this is a little harder to see because this is clearly a feeling and less an experience. But if you see that this is just an experience, just the experiential side, and taking away, minus the implicit side. So no longer having the implicit side of the experience. So the feelings drop away, and connecting it to only the explicit side, the actual details and the facts, and then you get the sensory, right? So it's a little harder to see here, but this is kind of what I wanted to illustrate here, is that how this is useful in understanding what sensory is doing, or what feeling is doing, or any of the functions are doing, right? Okay, so now I'm going to go back into, this is going to be part one. I talked about this and I had a question from Ram. So thanks, Ram, for asking this. It was something that was a little bit unclear. So what am I actually talking about here? What is information? Give me an example of what information is. And so the information I gave him, and I think this is a good one to talk about, is like, okay, let's say one of them is the theory of evolution, right? So you've got the theory of evolution here. You've got the low entropy part of the theory, and then you've got the high entropy part, all of how it plays out and all of the nuances, right? And then here you've got the theory of creation, right? And so when these two come into contact like this, you're going to have high entropy processing, high entropy computation, right? So this is a good example of what's going on here. And then if the two get close enough to go like this, so really what you're trying to do is you're trying to see, okay, are these worldviews compatible? Can I merge them? Am I going to need to take something from one and then get rid of all of the chaff, right? am I going to let this completely impregnate my worldview, right? All these kind of questions are going on when you're starting to actually compute the differences between these two forms of information, right? And so I can talk about, for me here, this for me is going to be extroverted feeling. So I'm going to try to externalize, because it's a sensitive subject when you're talking about this, when you're processing this, I'm going to try to externalize, okay, whatever low entropy thing I come up with, it's going to have a high entropy impact. How is that high entropy impact going to look on me? How am I going to be able to communicate this? How am I going to be able to compare how everyone's going to react to this in their experience, and implicitly, and that's what the FE side is going to start computing for me when I'm trying to merge these two things together, right? And same thing, the SE is going to start doing the same thing. It's going to start trying to internalize examples of, and trying to prove, right? It's going to be very explicit. It's going to be trying to internalize examples and see all of the different, okay, there's birds, there's cats, do they have a common ancestor? And I'm going to be trying to process that sensory extrovertedly. Okay, there's cats, there's birds, all that kind of stuff. And I'm going to be trying to internalize that. Okay, let me take that in, right? And then the same thing, the TI side of it, like I can only talk for myself, but everyone insert your functions here, right? The TI side of it is looking at, okay, low entropy. How do these two contradict on a low entropy area? How does evolution and how does creationism contradict? How can they be, how can they be merged? How can I internalize everything I'm getting from the SE, but how can I also internalize everything I am getting from my introverted intuition, right? Both, yeah, how does this low entropy, so introverted intuition is also doing the comparing on the low entropy. So it's doing that with my introverted thinking, but it's trying to externalize. It's like, okay, can we test this? Can we see how it goes into play? Can I see this play out? Will I take bacteria and can I get bacteria to evolve? Okay, right? How did this play out? And then the same thing is, okay, let's start from the moment life came about, right? If it came about like this, how would it play out? How is my NI going to simulate this out? How is it externalizing this process, right? And then that externalizing of the process is going to give me back a little bit of information on the low entropy scale to compare more, right? And so that's kind of what I was talking about here on information interaction. But this isn't not just in my own mind. This is going to be when two ideologies extrovertedly come into contact. So that's kind of what we're talking about here. And that's why all of these come into play. And we're going to talk more about what they are, what the difference between these two are in future videos. But I just wanted to do that clarification on the last video as well. So this has been part 2. Thanks again to Otim. Let me stop the screen share. Yeah, thanks again to Otim for telling us what this coin was and for pointing us in this direction. And I hope it's a little bit more clear, because I see this is, I started with these two because these are the more difficult. I mean, I can see the community is having more of a reaction to these, a little bit more disagreement with what's going on here. So I'm hoping you guys can start seeing what we're talking about in these 2 videos. And yeah, thanks for watching, and please leave your feedback in the comments. I really appreciate it all. As you see, I'm really trying to pay attention. In my next video, I'm really going to try to address what happened in the last video. Okay, have a good one, everybody, and thanks for watching.